Hello and welcome, fellow sovereigns. Well, I'm sitting outside here waiting for my motorbike to be serviced, and I thought, what better way to spend the time than with you? So nice to be here with you. And just a couple of things have happened, and I realised that everything that's going on, everything that's always going on, either restricts or releases us. Now, one thing, I watched a video last night, an interview with Michael Parkinson interviewing Dr. Jacob Bukowski, the famous Polish scientist and poet who was responsible for the Ascent of Man TV series. And Dr. Bukowski was, one of the things he said, he explained that the chimpanzees used to live in the forest, they used to live in the trees, and across the Sahara basically was such a thick forest that the chimpanzees never came down from the forest. They lived in the forest with their prehensile tails, and they were tree dwellers, and they never came to ground. Well, they never needed to. And then somewhere between 5 and 20 million years ago, we had, dare I say it, they had global warming, and we've survived it. But so the very, very thick forest across the Sahara started to become depleted. There were less trees. And so the monkeys had to learn to go from one tree to another by going across the ground. They had to climb down from the trees and walk across the ground and then up to the next tree. And so they had to learn to walk more upright. And as the trees became more and more depleted, there were longer distances between the trees. And so those chimpanzees that learnt to walk survived better. And they developed into what we know as humans, us. We have learnt to walk. And we did that because our environment disappeared and became rarer and rarer, and the things that we relied on, i.e. trees, were no longer there. And so our adaptation to that proved a huge success because a whole new species was born. And here we are. And that lesson can be taken to almost everything in our lives. So I've seen some posts recently, and people are concerned, some are downright angry about the fact that Coles supermarkets are now sitting up in Melbourne as credit card only. You can't buy cash there, and people are livid, raving about this terrible thing. But like that abundant trees, there are now less places we can go to spend our cash if we don't want to use credit card. So those who are adapting to that, i.e. finding other places to go, will probably survive better than those who are complaining. So when our environment changes, we need to change. We either change or we don't. We see it as a restriction or as a release. So now we're being released into a new environment, and all it takes is a change of mind to see, for example, more credit card only shops around. That's an opportunity for us to start searching out the smaller, let's say, I'm going to have to change my hand because it's getting sore. We can start changing our environment to find other places to forage, just as the chimpanzees did, and they evolved into something else. So when we see what are apparent restrictions and change our minds and change that into a release, it's an opportunity to find new ways of doing things. And all of these other things that have been going on, people are much more cynical, let's say. Some are angry about doctors. We don't trust doctors anymore, particularly those who are still hooked into the big pharma drama. So what it's done is released us, and it's released a whole group of doctors and dentists and other medicals and some are finding new ways of being. But it's also releasing us, because we're now finding these new doctors who are more connected to the natural world and our natural world, and ways of living more wholesomely, living more connected to the earth, less chemicals, less toxins and all of that sort of stuff. So while it may seem restrictive, because more and more doctors are falling into line with the system, there are also possibly an equal number that are saying, wow, I've been released from that. I've been kicked out of the medical association, whatever it is, and now I can do what I like. So the doctors are being released, we're being released, and this whole drama over the last 3 or 4 years, people have seen it as restrictive. I've been lucky. Where I'm living, we really haven't had restrictions. I still go out every day, and haven't worn a mask and done any of that silly stuff. And those who have been restricted, yes, it's been difficult. But when we change our mind about apparent restrictions, we suddenly find, we've found new groups of people that we didn't know before. People who think like we do, people who see the world in our way. And we didn't know these people before the restrictions turned up. So we saw restrictions, and some have stayed with restrictions and carried on complaining. Others have gone, oh, here's an opportunity to commune with a new group of people, with new groups of people in new ways. And so everything in our lives is either a restriction or a release. And so I simply invite you to look at what's in the way at the moment. And so often, I'm in a motorbike area. So often, what we see as in the way is the way. So what was in the way before for the chimpanzees was lack of trees. And that's become the way of humans. We don't use trees to get around anymore. That was maybe 10 million years ago. Nothing has changed. Our new way is simply the way. And so I invite you to look at what's in the way for you. Change your mind and just say, well, it's in the way and I'm seeing it as a restriction. How can I see this as a release? And just be with the possibility that there is release, not necessarily knowing what it is. And watch the magic happen, because when we change our minds, whatever it is we're looking for, even though we don't know what it is, if we're open to whatever it is, it will happen. On this rock I stand, it will happen. So, I bless you, and I offer you restriction to release today. I bless you and all who sail in her.